Welcome once again to the Ahern video podcast. Today I want to talk about truck capacity and how to deal with it. I'm constantly asked, is capacity as bad as I'm experiencing? Yes. Is it going to continue to get worse before it gets better? Yes. Well then how can I survive if the truck capacity is killing my business? For example, I get a call from a freight broker and he says, I can't cover all my loads. If I try to take on more loads and then I can't cover them, the shipper gets upset with me. So all of a sudden my margins are starting to go down and it's no fun anymore, and I had the best year I had last year, but all of a sudden this truck capacity, so maybe I should sell, maybe I should just shut it down, what should I do? And I said, well, listen to what you're telling me. You're telling me that you're coming off the best year you've ever had in your life. And what is that reason? Well, our margins were up. Now you're telling me your margins are going down when there's no capacity. Isn't that telling you something? And I made him think. Your rate should not be going down when there's no capacity. It's all about supply and demand. So what should you do? You go and you analyze your existing customer base. You look at the rates you're getting, you look at the fuel surcharge, and you look at the payment schedule. Then as you have opportunity for new freight, what do? You look at the new freight, you look at the fuel surcharge, you look at the rates, and you look at the payment terms. You've always heard me say cash flow is king. Profitability is great, but cash flow is king. So if you can increase your margins, you can increase your cash flow, and you have to get rid of a shipper that you've done business with for 2 or 3 years, get rid of that shipper. Why? Because there is no loyalty today in our business. There used to be, but there isn't. How many times you hear the shipper say, give me 50 trucks, give me 100 trucks, give me 500 trucks, and you do it, and then all of a sudden you have a financial collapse like we had, and they say, well, sorry, but we don't need those trucks anymore. Now what do you do with that iron? And more importantly, we've got an aging driver population, we have a driver shortage. How are you going to get drivers into those trucks? So now you've got a huge debt, that piece of iron isn't generating any revenue, and you put yourself into a, quote, pickle. I think it's very important to build relationships. I think relationships are very important. But we also do work with redesigning traffic lanes for shippers, and I had a shipper come to me and he says, all of a sudden my box mattresses are costing me a lot of more money and nobody wants to haul them and blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, of course. And why do you think that is? They're very bulky. It takes up a lot of space. And the rates they're charging you are way too low. Well, that's all I can afford. Well, then you got a couple of choices. Find things that you can't afford to do because there's no trucks. Well, what do you suggest we do? And I said, look, take your power lanes, the lanes where you're having consistent traffic, and dedicate those to that particular trucker, that particular trucking company. Now they've got consistent freight with high rates. They can take some of this. They'll adjust the rates accordingly, but you'll have capacity. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, then that's why they're not going to haul your freight anymore, because you aren't a loyal customer. I don't care if you've been hauling freight if they've been hauling freight for you for 5 years. What you're saying is, you need to operate at a loss to deliver my product. Well, that's not what I said. Okay, let me put it another way. You need to deliver my product at an operating loss. And he says, oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm saying you're telling someone how to run their business. And you're telling someone if they want to do business with you, they have to do it under your terms and conditions and lose their shirt. I grew up in Chicago, and I grew up on the streets. And we had a word that I can't use, but we would tell you what to do with your losing proposition. And that's the point I'm making. So if you're a freight broker or you're a trucking company and you know that capacity is an issue, you've got to get the biggest bang for your dollar. You don't want to go home at night and tell your wife or your girlfriend or your children that they're losing their house. You don't want to create that fear that every person wants is security, whether it's your employees, whether it's your wife, whether it's your children. In order to do that, you have to look realistically and get your emotions out of the picture. You need to look at your rates. You need to look at your customers. You look at your payment terms. If a customer says, you're going to haul my freight in 60 days, that is not a customer. And believe me, I have some that say, we want to pay you in 60 to 90 days because we're a gigantic company. And they're a gigantic company because they're putting little companies like you out of business. because you cannot dispatch that truck. And if they want to pay you in 60 and 90 days, it's really longer because it may take you 10 to 12 days from the time the bill of lading is produced to get the invoice out. So think about that. So as you're reworking your business model, take these tips that I'm giving you. Look at your rates, look at your lanes, look at your fuel surcharge, and look how quickly you get paid. Then look at what the opportunities are on the horizon. And if you can get commitments on the horizon for more money, you got two choices. If you want to be loyal, you go back to the shipper and say, here's my rates, are you going to meet them, and here's my terms and conditions. If you don't, because the big boys are doing it. Well, you say, how do you compete with the big boys? There are many people that want to do business with small businesses. There are a lot of people that don't want to do business with gigantic companies. That means you got to step outside your comfort zone. You got to start looking for those kind of people that are attracted to you. But you can accomplish anything you want if you're willing to make the sacrifices. Till next time, thank you for attending the podcast.